Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first very late hub meeting of this municipal year. I hope everybody is settling into their roles, particularly newer members who are finding their feet still. The Mayor will be with us shortly, but she's on a mayoral engagement, which is why the meeting was taken back an hour. But hopefully she's sent a message that she's running up the hill in her heels, so she won't be very comfortable. So we'll make a start, everybody. So item 1, apologies for absence. Mr. White.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, members. We have no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Item 2, public questions. Do we have any public questions?
There are no public questions, Leader.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Everybody knows what to do, so if anyone's got anything to declare before we start, please let me know. No, if anything should come up during the meeting, then please do declare your interest. Item 4, items requiring urgent attention. Mr. White?
Not aware of any, Leader.
No. Right, item 5, confirmation of the minutes held on the 7th of March 2023. Okay. So if we go through the pages of the Hub Committee meeting held on the 7th of March, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and page 6. Is everybody in agreement with those minutes? May I have a seconder first of all, though, please?
Happy to second, Leader.
And everyone in favour, please? That's unanimous. Thank you all very much. Right, moving forward to item 6 is the Hub Committee Forward Plan. And this is the provisional forward plan for at least 4 months, starting in July 2023. It provides an indicative date for matters to be considered by the Hub Committee, as you will see by the following pages, that there is a lead officer and dates when documents are going to be decided upon and when the reports will come to Hub. So for newer members, that's how it works. We just explain it all in advance. The forward plan is published to publicise consultation dates and enable dialogue between the Hub Committee and all councillors, the public and other stakeholders. It will also assist the Council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee in planning their contribution to policy development and holding the Hub Committee to account. So this report then goes forward to Overview and Scrutiny. So for all of you on that, this will come forward and then you scrutinise the work that's going forward and decide yay, nay, what bits you'd like to add, etc. Okay, so going through the plan, does anybody have any questions about the roles, the plan itself, dates? No? Okay then, that is just about noting that. So we then move on to item 7, setting the priorities for the new council. The recommendations are that we consider and approve the timeline and approach for development of the next iteration of the council's corporate strategy. There will be all the dates sent out to all members of when we hope the plan will come to fruition and go through all the consultations, public consultation that it needs to go through, which will be led by Mr. Hawke. Work with the senior leadership team and Assistant Director for Strategy over the coming months to refine those priorities for the next 4 years, with a new draft corporate strategy ready for consideration by the Hub Committee at its meeting on the 21st of November. And note the intention that following the meeting held on the 21st of November, a period of consultation be undertaken to inform the final strategy prior to adoption by full council. and we hope that adoption will take place in February 2024. Thank you. Mr. Chief Exec, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you, Leader. Just to say that this is an entirely appropriate point in the Council's working life to do this review. The previous strategy was adopted in September 21. It guided the Council's work extremely well over the last few years with the thematic delivery plans that supported it, setting out the specific actions. We have an existing Year 3 delivery plan. We'll continue to work to that. In the meantime, the intention of this paper is to make sure that we can align the new administration's aims and ambitions into the Council's corporate strategy, ensuring that the resources and focus of the organisation are aligned behind that. So thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or anything else to make? Thank you, Councillor Edmonds.
Comment, if I may, Leader. Is it appropriate at this stage, or do you want to wait until debate?
I think nobody had any questions, so if we, I'll move the item.
Happy to second, sorry.
Might need somebody better trained.
You will.
Councillor Edmonds, please.
Yeah, thank you. There may be a bit of a question in it, but I think the current corporate plan has worked extremely well. It's given us a really good structure. It's given us direction. It's been able to measure our performance, challenge our performance. I think it's done all those things. And I'm very aware that Mr. Hawke and his team have put a huge amount of effort into this plan. I think it's worked incredibly well, along with the advisory group. So really, my hope is that as we look to refresh and construct a new plan, that we will look to keep the overall concept framework, which has served us well. So, you know, we're not going to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. We keep the same structure, just make it relevant to the challenges that lie ahead of us. And that would include the reporting procedure as well.
I have to say I totally agree with you. The concept that we've had for quite a number of years now has worked well. The plan that we're already working with, as it comes to its end, some of those bits will be put into the new corporate plan because we haven't quite done everything and things like that. So it's not about abandoning a plan at all. It's about streamlining and then going forward. But some of the concepts and ideas that are already in the corporate plan are something, you know, some of them we would want to keep because they've been good for the council and they've worked. And that is what is most important at the end of the day. It's not about throwing everything out and it's not about huge change. The advisory groups are advisory groups, but how we use those advisory groups may have to change because for those of us that were here before, we know they did not work as well as we had hoped they would. So I think putting a bit more structure behind the advisory groups and using them in a slightly different way, with guidance from Mr. Hawke, I think, he's going to have to be the brains behind that operation, is just to get them to work. And, you know, I could be, you know, giving him a poison chalice with that one, but I sincerely hope that they can work, and as we know, they didn't always, and that's the bit that is the challenge that we face. I think the strategy and corporate plan, etc., is not actually a challenge so much. I think it's the work that goes behind it is the challenge, because we have to be able to involve all our members on these advisory groups and to get them to work with the hub lead on those advisory groups. I hope that answers your comment.
I'm reassured, thank you, and I'm pleased to hear that.
Councillor Mott.
I would suggest, Leader, if I may, that the challenge isn't about engaging the members, it's about the members actually actively taking part within the advisory groups.
Better worded. Thank you, Councillor Mott. I hope everyone who's listening, who's on advisory groups there, realise that it is, you know, a responsibility and it is part of our work and something you sign up to do. So really, you should be doing. Councillor.
It is a responsibility, but it's also an opportunity. You know, it's an opportunity for all members to have a voice in this council. And so I would actively encourage all members to get involved in advisory groups and the whole process and get behind the corporate plan, because it will guide us, shape us, and deliver what we want to do for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment they'd like to make? No? Okay. So, are we happy to accept all the recommendations as noted on page 13 of the agenda? So we've had them proposed and seconded, so may I take a vote, please? Thank you very much, members. That's unanimous. Sorry, it's me again. We're on page 17 now, and this is the Q4 Integrated Performance Management Report. And that is that the recommendation is that the Hub Committee review the Q4 Integrated Performance Management Report covering the period between January 23 and March 2023. So if we move to the report itself, does anybody have any questions on the report? No, I can see lots of work has been done. There is very, very little in the red. In fact, I think there's only one item in the red, and that's the Eco Museum, that we just haven't been able to get the funding and help with other partners that we had hoped for. So that is there. The Chief Exec is, oh, he's following me. I thought he had his page ready to say something. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Leader. I thought if I could just jump in, just to obviously one of the mechanisms that Councillor Edmonds referred to under the previous item was the performance management framework, and this forms a key part of the council's performance management framework. Just thought it helpful to give some context because we've got a number of new members in the room that have joined us since this was implemented. It really pulls together a snapshot in time of progress against our corporate priorities and some of our key performance indicators. To supplement this, we do take a deep dive into some of the corporate strategy themes through our overview and scrutiny committee. So the proposal is certainly that we would continue to bring this quarterly report to Hub Committee until such a time, ongoing, but it will currently reflect on the Year 3 delivery plan for a plan for West Devon. So, yeah, some key sections, as I said, progress against corporate strategy actions, a summary of spend against those strategy actions, because our corporate strategy does have a resource plan against it. Key performance indicators, and then a risk management profile for the council, which is a snapshot of some of those strategic risks. So by no means sets out all risks facing the council, but just those key strategic risks that we need to highlight to our members. So that was just I just thought it helpful to give a quick overview as to how this fits into our wider performance management framework, Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hawke. Does anyone have any comments, questions?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the Eco Museum, and are we going to shelve that idea for the time being, or are we going to still pursue it if it's proved so difficult?
I can take that one, Leader. So in the, and I should have also said, this is the Q4 Integrated Performance Management Report. Because of the elections, it is coming to you slightly later than it would have previously. And in the Year 3 delivery plan, as adopted by Council, the Eco Museum no longer features in our delivery plan. So it's a timing issue, so it doesn't feature moving forward.
Did anyone else have a comment? Councillor Edmonds, please.
Overall, I think the performance is good, very good. Encouraging to see waste improving as well. Just one small point around planning enforcement. I see, the position is slightly off target. We've talked about enforcement a number of times over the years, but and the performance, I think, has improved, and the way that we are tackling our enforcement cases, and particularly our enforcement officers. I'm just wondering if we've been able to work through sort of the historic backlog of cases, whether we're now free of that, or are those cases still causing a bit of an issue in the performance figures that we're seeing in this report?
Sorry, I'm frantically looking around the room for any planning colleagues. I'm not 100% sure on the answer to that one, Councillor Edmonds, but what I can say is we do have an up-to-date performance report coming forward to overview and scrutiny later this month, so we'll make sure that we get that answer for you for that meeting.
Councillor Mott.
If I can explain, it does say in the narrative that the reason why it has dropped slightly is because of the number of cases that we've had coming in against the number that have been closed. So it's not necessarily a drop in performance, it's just that we are not able to keep up with the number of cases that were coming in.
Yeah, no, it was really, thank you. It was just, over the years we've had that rump of long-standing cases, which I know has been, very challenging for the team. And I was just really interested to know if we've been able to work through those, and we're now working on, more up-to-date enforcement cases. But we can cover that off when the report comes through, as Mr. Hawkes has just said.
I can confirm that from Tavistock South West, Councillor Bridgewater and myself, we had this aim to get rid of all of ours before the next council. Our historic ones have gone, but I don't know if everybody else's has on their enforcement lists that they get sent. And for newer members, the enforcement cases are something that you should read, because it just tells you of some of the issues going on in your ward. And I mean, we had on ours some going back to 2012. I know there was one on Councillor Mott's ward that had been there since about the early 2000s, because it was a very, very long-standing case with a banner across a bridge. And it went on forever. I mean, it's finally resolved, but, some of the cases have been on there for 10 plus years. And the officers have done a lot to get rid of them. But I know just from my list that we'd got down to, I think, one as we got to the elections, has suddenly grown, and ours is from a planning development site. So the Callington Road site regularly gets enforcement issues, and I don't know if many others, if that's what a lot of theirs are. But yeah, Councillor Mott is going to help us now.
I was going to say, if I can give a bit of context for the newer members, we get the lists published every 3 months, but what you very often don't see are the number of cases that go on that list and come off that list before it's published and circulated. So yes, you do see a number of historic cases on that listing. However, as you've already alluded to, they're very often the complicated cases, the ones where it's difficult to get information required. Enforcement can be a very long and protracted problem in some cases to be able to move it on and to be able to satisfy everybody, and it very often doesn't always satisfy everyone in the limitations that the team have. However, I can reassure members that we have a very strong team within the enforcement section of the department, and they are working very hard to work through the cases.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Were you wanting to say something, Councillor Squire? All right then, thank you. So we've had a proposer and a seconder for the report. Can I see all those in favour, please? Thank you very much.
Unanimous, thank you, Leader.
Councillor Renders, your turn now.
I'm up, okay. This report sets out the broad ambitions of the Council to firmly place housing at the heart of its priorities. We plan to continue with tackling the housing crisis declared by the last Council, and this report sets out a direction in terms of local interventions, policy changes and government lobbying on issues affecting our residents, including the loss of housing through the right to buy and the challenges with affordability in the private rented sector. As well as the delivery of new homes, we will also renew efforts to make the best use of existing stock and lift people out of the fuel poverty while supporting our climate priorities around decarbonising our existing homes. We will hold our landlords, both private and housing associations, to account, and most importantly support our most vulnerable residents with housing options to meet their specific needs. This report sets out the direction of travel and a commitment that housing will be a key issue for our new corporate strategy, and we will set out in more detail all our plans to deliver for our communities. Happy to answer any questions, and we've got Chris in the audience, as I see, and also is he online?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, how closely are we working with our local housing associations to try and deliver more social housing? Because that seems to be key, that they're involved in our plans as well. Thank you.
We're going to pass this one to Izzy or Chris for more specifics, but I know we have been working incredibly closely with them.
Izzy, do you want to take that? That's fine. Mrs. Blake.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Yes, absolutely. It's absolutely key that we do. Through best use of stock, we introduced and enhanced our tenants incentive scheme in the last administration, which meant that people who wish to downsize were given a generous incentive to do so. We've also worked with them on new build. We are looking at supporting our community land trust, and we work with a number, not just Live West, who are our stock transfer authority. We've also got a number of housing associations who are very supportive of our declaration of a housing crisis.
Thank you.
Councillor Moody.
Thank you very much, Chair. I also would like to just raise my concerns of the number of houses that housing associations are disposing of, and I think that needs to be built into the whole formula for housing for West Devon, and maybe that's something we can pursue later on through other committees. Definitely,
I think we've all found that in all of our wards, haven't we? So, especially in the more rural ones, so I think that's a definite for that one, to be honest. Councillor Moody. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Well, that was the point that I was going to raise regarding housing association. I think you said in your opening remarks about holding housing association to account, and I think that's a prime example that Councillor Moody has cited. So I fully support that comment, but also as well, I think the reason behind that is these properties are, shall we say, no longer fit for purpose and require a lot of work. My question would be, I don't know if it's relevant at this time, but when this piece of work is done, is that, you know, why the housing association failed to invest and spend money on these properties along the way to prevent them getting to a position where they're, you know, where they feel they're no longer viable and the only option is to sell them. So I'd be interested to know from the, you know, from the association at some point why that hasn't happened, and it's very damaging. A lot of these properties are in rural locations where we're absolutely desperate for rented property, a property of this type. So it flies very much in the face of the housing crisis and what we're trying to do when we have a housing association that's selling properties in rural locations and no doubt in our towns as well.
Agreed, completely agreed. Pushing against an open door on that one. We've had umpteen conversations about this historically, and I know we are of a mind to push further. I'll pass over to Ms Brooks Brickley because we did have a conversation about this not so long ago, and I think it's one of our main priorities, is it not?
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. Yeah, I think there's multiple strands. I mean, we're all in violent agreement, aren't we, on the problem, and that we would like it to stop. Obviously, we're not in direct control, and that's why we're frustrated. So we do have multiple strands that we will be seeking to apply. So firstly, where possible, we have successfully geared in funding to improve the quality of housing stock. So we are working with the worst quality housing with the most vulnerable tenants to get those uplifted in terms of, you know, how efficient they are. So that helps some selected properties. Secondly, there's a role for this council to have a really painful and open and honest conversation with the RPs themselves. So I think, you know, with some preparation, we can queue up the right questions and really get into the detail. And I think that is a really helpful thing to do because it's a public meeting, it's a formal meeting, and quite honestly, you might find you get a bit of traction that way. Separately, we are undertaking a bit of legal work just to look at our stock transfer agreement, but to be honest, I'm not anticipating after all this time finding a magic solution to it in that regard, but it's always good to know where you stand. So multiple strands, I think, and the councillors and the council, I think, has probably got the strongest lever to pull there.
I make a comment on that issue, that I've recently dealt with a case in my ward where a social house was sold on the open market, and the tenants bought a house with asbestos tiling on the roof, which they weren't aware of when they bought it, and they've been trying to get funding for solar panels, and they're not allowed to because they've got to replace the roof first. So those are the sorts of issues that are coming up with these social houses that have been sold privately, and I think really housing associations should bear some responsibility for that, not pass the problems on to tenants that can't afford to amend the problems. Thank you.
Agreed. Councillor Jury.
Thank you. We're still in questions, I think, and I'm waiting to ask a couple of questions, if I may, that are connected. I welcome the paper. Am I correct in thinking that this paper is intended to underpin and support the housing crisis that has already been declared and the objectives and plans that we set out at that time? And as a connected question to that, obviously within the last council, we have embarked on a number of housing projects. We know that at least 2 of those have not been successful, but there are others that we are developing. Can we take it that the commitment to those projects remains and that we will be moving forward as quickly as we can within the context of the housing market and the difficulties that there are in delivering some of those projects in order to see them through to fruition?
Do you want to be more specific than I am on probably my answer of a yes?
Well, it did sound like a political question rather than a technical question, if I'm 100% honest. But that might be, you may disagree with Councillor Rogers.
I think the Chief Executive would like to respond to that.
So the housing crisis was something which was declared by the previous administration, but was clearly supported by the entire council very strongly. The intention is to build upon that in the commitments that is given here. Clearly, as we work through the corporate strategy, there may be different emphasis on some elements than others. Clearly, the conversation so far has indicated an intent to focus on quality of existing stock, and I think that's something which many councillors have made clear to me as a concern. In terms of the specific projects, the intention is to bring back further reports in due course on those as at an appropriate stage. So hopefully that helps in terms of
Councillor Daniel.
Thank you. I just want to remind people about the housing needs surveys that will be carried out later this year. South Taunton and Princetown, I think, are the two that will have them, but I don't know if they're going on anywhere else. But I think I want to know that we're going to publicise these really well and how we're going to do it to make sure we can demonstrate there is a need rather than just saying there's a need. We need the evidence in order to get the homes built, particularly in the rural areas. Thank you.
Princetown one has been completed. There are a number of others underway at the minute. I don't know the details of exactly where they are, but I think there's several.
Could I just ask everyone who's on the town or parish council to remind their local councils that this is carrying on and to have people, to make sure people complete the surveys?
Councillor Edmonds. I've got you down
here. Totally support the paper. And I think at the end it says that a more detailed report will come forward, more detailed proposals. And I think that's really the bit that I'm very interested in, is, you know, what actions can we take now to really show some tangible results of how we're addressing these issues. I'm just wondering about the timing of those proposals and what we can do in the short term, you know, to really make a difference to those people who find themselves, you know, in the middle of this crisis. You know, as Councillor Jory mentioned, we do have projects up and running. They will take time to come to fruition. I'm just wondering if there is, you know, what can we do, and will that be in the proposals? And can I perhaps throw one into the mix completely off the top of my head, in terms of providing temporary accommodation? You know, should we be considering direct purchase of housing stock, you know, from our own resources in order to alleviate the pressure? And also on the back of that, what are the numbers here? What is the size of the demand in terms of homelessness, potential homelessness? And, you know, what are the real issues? What are the numbers? And now I think we've overachieved on our affordable housing target. So it would be really good to understand the size of the problem and then look at solutions, particularly in the short term, where we can actually make a difference. Thank you.
I was going to answer, but I'll pass over to Mr. Brooke.
Thank you, Councillor. And I agree, temporary accommodation is an area where we can have a really very real impact on people who really do need support at that pretty desperate time in their lives. And yes, acquisition of property is a quick fix where it's viable. And I'm really pleased that we've been successful in gearing in the LAF funding, which has allowed West Devon to buy on the open market new housing stock. So without the challenges of some of the issues we discussed earlier. So brand new, 10-year guaranteed houses. We completed on the 29th of June. So we have undertaken that action in response to that government initiative. And there is a second round of that funding to assist with another cohort, which, you know, I know there is support for, but we do need to formally get that position approved, which we will do in time.
Councillor Mann. Oh, there you are.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. I've been working on this from a town perspective, obviously, and our housing needs survey for Tavistock showed that was almost twice the need that had been identified 5 years ago. Part of that is to do with the changes that have happened since COVID. But one of the things that I'm very concerned about is the impact of the renter reform bill combined with the mortgage rates that are going through the roof for landlords, which is creating a spike in Section 21 because people are needing to sell up properties that they've invested in, and I think this is going to get worse. And I do think if you're going to be bringing a report in September, I would hope that we sort of take that into account in particular, just because I see the need for temporary accommodation going up quite significantly within the next 6 months. I mean, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with the renter reform bill, but if that is something that's on the radar, and then also whether or not that housing needs survey that we've done, because I have seen all of the West Devon ones coming forward, whether that is feeding into this as well, because I noticed that it's not sort of mentioned anywhere, but obviously was done in conjunction with West Devon's affordable housing officers and officers at that time.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that description of some of the challenges that are in the market. And yes, we're completely aware of those two things. And I agree with you that in the short term, it's a problem, so temporary accommodation. And in the long term, it's a challenge for the private rented sector, which is creating a lot of the challenge for us. Now, what we can't say is, oh, well, that's okay, we'll tackle the legislation, because we can't. So we have to think of other ways to support that. The housing need thing point is a really relevant one, and I'll circulate the schedule of the housing need surveys that are going to go along in the whole of the borough. Without really robust evidence, it's very difficult to tackle the problem. So yeah, just to restate that engagement from at the council level with the towns, it's brilliant when they get behind it, because if we don't get engagement with those surveys, we essentially get a fake result, because you get a no demand, but we know probably that there is demand. So absolutely yes. I don't have a magic solution, but I agree with those challenges which we need to address going forward in the next 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Brooke. Councillor Oxborough.
Thank you. Question really that's stimulated by paragraphs 1.3 and 1.4 in the report about the energy efficiency of housing stock. I'm wondering if any work has been done in quantifying the scale and scope of interventions necessary in order to bring housing stock up to the necessary heat efficiency standards that we're going to require, and what the cost of that might be, what types of interventions are required. I ask that question with the knowledge that many properties in West Devon date from around the 1900s. They're very old and they're very energy inefficient. They're also extremely difficult to modify, and the cost of bringing those up to scratch is going to be astronomical. For some people that own those properties, it's going to be unaffordable. And in landlords' cases, many of them are not going to be willing to do so, because, of course, it affects their bottom line. So it's really a question around that, the affordability and where the money is going to come from, what interventions we can put in place as a council to kind of make it happen before we start losing gas boilers in just a few years' time.
Yeah, we have spoken about that as well, but I don't know how far into depth we've gone on that yet, because we're quite new into this. But
well, I can just give you a little bit of market commentary, which isn't my own research, but we are aware there is lots of research on this. So it's about 100 grand a property to actually get them into a carbon neutral position, and it's being done successfully on the continent. Surprise, surprise. It's a challenge in the UK because of the way we think, essentially. So there's a cultural piece that we need to overcome, because the way that it can be done is essentially by offsetting future. There is a way of monetizing the reduction in your bills, and you can then take out, there's an insurance essentially, so there's a finance product that goes alongside the reduction in the bills, which pays over the long term the 100 grand it takes to sort your house out. So there is actually some really excellent work that is being done on this, and if members want to, through you council renders, we can pull together what's being done at a national level. What I would say is the people who are best placed to impact on this is the RPs. So again, it goes back to the housing providers. It goes back to us facilitating that conversation. It's not for us to do. It's not our housing stock, but definitely pointing in the right direction to how it can be done would be quite helpful, I think.
It would be brilliant if we could do that. It would be excellent.
Thank you. I think just a point of clarity for a question that was raised earlier with regard to South Taunton and Princetown. I understand that remit comes under the National Park, although it is within West Devon. But also, I know we have Seymour lettings, and I know they're working hard. So I don't know whether that sort of activity would be reported under this, or where we would see how well they are doing in attracting new landlords to sign up to the scheme, or not. We don't seem to hear any performance reports on how they're doing.
Sorry to put on you, Mr. Brooke, but there you go.
Councillor Mott, forgive me. I was distracted by something very briefly, just at the bit where you mentioned the thing that you didn't get the reports on. Okay,
Seymour lettings.
Not a problem.
I'm not sure if it would come under the
yeah, we can give you all
the blanket of this sort of remit that we're looking at.
It
if
does.
We could have it,
very valid point.
They're working hard to attract new landlords to the scheme.
Not a problem. And yeah, we know everything there is to know about it, and we can bring you a report by agreement at the right time. Absolutely. That was no problem.
More questions? Sorry, Councillor Edmonds, I apologise.
Am I allowed a third question, Leader?
It's you, of course you are.
Sorry? I missed that? Oh, you're a gentleman, thank you. I'm just going back to the housing needs survey with Mr. Brooke, if I may. You mentioned there the importance of these surveys. Is that in planning terms? We need to be able to demonstrate the housing need from a planning perspective. Is that the issue? Because
yeah, essentially, Councillor, that's absolutely right. So
I know it would be in the national park, but in terms of the rest of the borough.
Yeah, the same, but it's the same. So for the national park, they have policies that allow development where there is housing need, and they have a very stringent, a very high bar, essentially. We have a lower bar, but it's still high, and it allows for development in areas where it might otherwise not be deemed appropriate to develop at a small scale when it's supported locally and there is an evidence of housing need. So at a scale where you're looking at small development, it's essential, but it also forms part of the wider evidence base for our strategic policies, and that's the other part that's so important. So even if you do them at a local level, but you have no genuine way of using the exemptions policy at a scale in your location, if you can collect the data at borough level, you can then influence the next level of strategic policies that come through the joint local plan, and they may be in a position to allow the open market, the free market, to deliver the same aspiration. So completely right, it's all about evidence.
Yeah, okay, I get that. I just wonder at times whether that survey and the process kind of gets in the way. What we know is an issue. Do we need a survey to tell us that there's a housing shortage in Lifton or wherever it might be? You could go to any village in the borough, and I would think most people would agree that, yeah, there's a shortage of affordable housing. People want to stay, live and work in their own community. I doubt we'd need a survey to tell us that. And sometimes I think surveys can not go as well as we would hope and produce the result that we would expect. So are we overcomplicating the process? Shouldn't we just be concentrating on getting on and delivering what everybody thinks we need?
You raise a really good point. Your view is shared, I know, by a lot of people. There are pros and cons to this argument. So the con of having to do the tests, if you like, and the engagement with the community are that it is yet another hurdle. And I totally accept that. And without good engagement, it does run the risk of giving you a potentially misleading result. So you're completely right to say this is a blocker. The advantage of it is if you just go, if you say at planning policy level, if this borough council says, we know there's a problem, so we're just going to crack on, I can guarantee you will meet local community resistance. So it's also an unblocker. And unfortunately, on balance, the argument is slanted in favour of having a policy position based on evidence.
Okay, and I know we're into a process of undertaking surveys. So we've started that. Are they going, we on course in terms of completion of those surveys? Because, so if we need to get them, fair enough. The next question for me is, how quickly can we complete that and get the evidence and move on?
Yes, so we are on course. We have done some, we're doing some, and we hope to do the whole borough within 2 years, which lines up with our strategic need, if you like, from the joint local plan perspective.
I've waited till last very patiently for me. When we were at the LGA conference last week, I was asked to give a new leaders speech, and I did mine on housing, and it had a very good reception, particularly on the bit of social landlords selling off properties in rural areas. We are not unique, and it is almost, it's insidiously, knocking numbers off the stock, but not replacing them in some really rural villages. As we know from Councillor Daniel, 5 houses have been lost in South Seal. Now, South Seal's not a place that you build houses in every day of the week. So, there is a lot of risk, and a lot of councils are very concerned about it now. Housing is going to be a really main focus for this council going forward. The housing strategy that was put in place before is going to be strengthened, and it is going to dive a bit deeper than we had previously said, because circumstances have changed. These Section 21 notices are absolutely lethal. People can just be thrown out with like a month's notice. Well, actually, it's more than that, I think. No, 2 months' notice. Thank you, Councillor Mann. And it is awful. I've had to deal with one that was a really difficult case. And, our social providers for some of these very vulnerable people are not great in the way they allocate the housing, because they often allocate before it's even been refurbished, gone into, looked at and everything. So it can cause a lot of distress. And we don't want that. I want people to be able to go to bed knowing the roof over their head is safe and that they're not going to be thrown out tomorrow. I've actually spoken with the doctor's surgery about us working with doctors, because there are many people that do not come and tell us their problem, but they'll go and tell their GP. And one of the doctor's surgeries, Mrs. Blake has actually spoken to, and it would be interesting if the patient is willing to have their details taken forward so we can look at it, because they are so terrified at the state of their housing, which is making them physically and mentally unwell, but they're scared if they complain too much about that housing, they'll be thrown out of it. And this is an issue that we all need to work together collaboratively in partnership with, doctors' surgeries, citizens' advice, the landlords themselves. And we used to have a private landlords forum in this council at one point, and I don't know what happened to it, Mrs. Blake or Mr. Brooke. But we did used to have a private landlords forum, and that worked well. We worked with them. And, we have got to do all this because housing is really a huge, huge issue, but it is one of the ones that affects people the most. If you're worried about how you can pay your mortgage, your rent, the state of your house, rogue landlords, there are all sorts of things. And some of it is, yes, we need new affordable housing, but we have to be realistic. Building new affordable housing is not necessarily the answer. It's maintaining current stock, putting pressure on landlords to look after their property. As I said at the conference, registered social providers seem to have lost what their focus should be. Their focus is they are not Bob the Builder. Their focus is on their tenants. And that is the really important thing, is they should be looking after the people within the homes they've already got or built. And that bit seems to have been lost slightly through business, economy, etc. So it's something, I really hope as a council that we focus on even more strongly than we did in the previous council. Sorry, my bit over.
Thank you. I'll read the recommendation. Oh, if there are no other questions, I will read the recommendation then, shall I? This recommendation is that the Hub Committee endorses the prioritisation by this council of its resources and influence to improve affordable and social housing outcomes in the borough, specifically to take actions that will benefit the greatest number of homes and help the greatest range of residents in need. Seconder, please.
happy to second.
Add it.
Add to debate. Oh, thank you, Councillor Jury.
Thank you. Of course, I absolutely support this recommendation. In doing so, I take you at your word that it's building on what we've done before and making it better and taking into account, I think, the complexities that obviously come up and overtake all of us when we're dealing with this area. It's a hugely complex area, and we've just touched on a few of those issues today, dealing with our own stock, dealing with housing associations, dealing with housing need surveys, as we all do within our wards, dealing with the local opposition to any sort of development whatsoever. All of those factors and more come into this, and it's hugely complicated. So I accept that it's going to take a bit of time to pull a report together, and I really hope it does the intention here justice. So I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Yeah, and just on reflection on that, I mean, it was a carry-on from the crisis that you announced, and we were never going to know just how much things were going to be affected, but affected in a negative way, with all the other things in the fuel price increases and things. So definitely a big nod. Anybody else want to say anything else?
It's not a question. Look, I'm very mindful of all the hard work that has gone into housing since we've declared a housing crisis. So I certainly acknowledge that, and it's right that we double down on our efforts to push this forward. So I fully support it. It's just momentum, I think, that I'm really focusing on, but I fully support the team that's been driving this, and I know how difficult and challenging this is, but really keen that we keep the momentum in order that we deliver results. Thank you.
100% agree on that. Anybody else before we go to that? It was good fun, wasn't it? Shall we vote?
That is unanimous. Thank you, Deputy Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Right, following on from the housing and how we've all been quite passionate about how we feel about that, we come to the next report on page 47 with the cost of living crisis. And if I can ask Councillor Leach to put forward his report and speak to it, please.
Thank you. This report covers a number of initiatives that we hope will help those most in need. The Council recognises how important it is to support all our residents through the cost of living crisis, and the report sets out further ways in which we can do so. The Council has received a further household support fund allocated from Devon County Council, which will be received in 2 tranches, as it is intended that this support will be provided through to March 2024. Firstly, we propose to make 2 direct support payments in August and December 2023. This will be provided to single income households receiving council tax reduction and not receiving passported benefits such as universal credit, residents with caring responsibilities, and armed forces veterans. We think it is important to support all residents who may be struggling with the living costs. Therefore, any resident who is experiencing financial hardship due to the cost of living crisis is able to apply to the Household Support Fund. It is proposed that the balance of the funding is released in 3 tranches, starting in July for an open application process. Shortly before Christmas 2022, the government announced a council tax support fund for both pension and working age residents who are receiving council tax reduction on the 1st of April 2023. This was intended to help residents pay their 2023-24 council tax bills. A mandatory payment of up to £25 was awarded, and it was agreed that officers would bring back a further report in late spring with a recommendation on how to use the balance of any funding. There are no restrictions on its use other than it must be used to support vulnerable households with council tax. The remaining balance is £30,000, and it is recommended this is used to top up the Exceptional Hardship Fund, which provides additional support to those residents struggling to pay their council tax. Finally, I refer to paragraph 2.14, which details the proactive work that the benefit team have been doing in identifying residents who may be eligible to claim the pension credit guarantee credit, which means they will then become entitled to cost of living payments and other help from the government. We can, of course, do more work in this area, and we will also be using non-digital forms of communication to help and support our residents who would prefer to engage with us in a more personal way. If you have any questions about this report, I'm sure that Mrs. Hotchkiss will be able to fill in the gaps.
Does anyone have any questions, please? Councillor Jury first.
Thank you. One question for Mrs. Hotchkiss, if I may. Item 2.14 says that the council wrote to 144 pensioners. Item 2 about council tax reduction and the pension credit guarantee credit. Item 2.15 says that at the time of writing we had 17 that responded. I know you were trying very hard to increase that. Have we managed to increase that figure? And is there any evidence as to why the take-up, on the face of it at least, looks so low?
Thank you, Councillor Jury. Unfortunately, we haven't really made any great strides in terms of increasing that figure. I think in terms of why, I think it's absolutely brilliant that we managed to support those 17 residents, but in context of the headline figure, that's clearly not, good enough. So I think in terms of why that figure was so low, I think it is possibly around how certain groups of people choose to interact with us. In terms of the pension credit application process, it's a central government process, but it is very much digitally driven. So I think what we are proposing to do is we are going to relaunch our cost of living leaflet and look to do some mail drops in some of the more rural communities, so we can reach out to people like that. And as a team, we'll also kind of identify the people that we need to interact with in different ways, and if it's necessary to send people out to see them, to help them through the process, we will do that.
Councillor Moody was next.
Thank you very much. Just on that point, that's where ward members and parish councils come in as well, and I'll be making sure that, particularly in my area, Tavistock, that we will be doing that. Just a question, you referred to people who are in having caring responsibilities, i.e. those people who are council tax reduction and in receipt of carer's allowance. There are a number of people who, if they go £1 over, they don't get carer's allowance, but they have an underlying carer's allowance. I forget what they call it, but they're still seen as being carers. Can you explain how that fits in with this recommendation? Thank you.
Yeah, when bringing forward any proposals, we obviously look to make it as sort of as administratively straightforward as possible. So a lot of the initial work is around sort of existing data sets and what we obviously already know about people. But I think there's a really, you make a really important point there in that we do actually need to think about how we actually engage with, organisations who can actually enable us to reach out to these people. We obviously can't give them direct support payments unless that recommendation changes, but we can certainly encourage them to apply to the Household Support Fund and provide that support through that way. But yeah, we've kind of got to work out how we actually reach out to wider groups and give that support in other ways.
We just remembered it's called entitlement, carers allowance entitlement. Underlying
entitlement, yeah, that's the one.
Councillor Edmonds, please. You didn't. Oh my goodness, why have I got you written down? Councillor Mann, please.
Just going back to how you calculated the individuals that were potentially eligible for pension credit, can you just explain to me what you based the criteria on for that, like how you identified those residents?
Yeah, I mean, because we assess council tax reduction and housing benefits, we obviously have income details for those people, and in doing that, we can, identify that potentially they do have an entitlement to other things because of their age, their status, and their financial circumstances.
The reason I'm asking is just in my experience with some residents that have that kind of a letter, that some of them are just on the border and aren't actually eligible. Is that possible that you've identified a group of people that are very close but maybe no cigar kind of thing?
Yeah, quite possibly, because we can kind of only go on the information that we have. The pensioners tend to be they're kind of a fairly static group of people in terms of requesting income information from them. So it may well be that they're kind of on the cusp of something, or that information is possibly slightly out of date, which means that possibly they weren't eligible.
Sorry, just one more follow-up question. Is this fund able to be offered to people that aren't eligible for, is the Household Support Fund able to be offered to people who aren't eligible for say, pension credit, but are on that border, so that if they were in that group and maybe don't quite qualify for pension credit, could you still extend assistance? Because that group of people obviously miss out on a large group of passported benefits.
Yeah, why we focus on that particular group was it was time limited in terms of if they applied within a window, they would be entitled to the government's cost of living payments. So in terms of the overall proposal, there is just sort of like open funding in those 3 tranches. So any resident at all in West Devon who is struggling can apply through that process.
Can I bring in Mr. Molyneux now, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've just been listening to the debate, and what's become apparent is we've got a lot of new councillors. The world of benefits is incredibly complex, and if the committee so wish it, I think it would be worthwhile getting Mrs. Hodgkiss and the team to do a briefing session on some of the main benefits and how people apply, what people are eligible for. I just think it'd be a worthwhile session, picking up on what Councillor Moody said about using councillors as part of getting the message across. So that would be my suggestion, and we could add it as a recommendation to the report if you wanted, that we will arrange a briefing session for all members, and we can explore all the different benefits and who's entitled to what.
Thank you very much, Mr Molyneux. Councillor Leach, are you willing to take that recommendation and attack it on the end?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Councillor Bridgewater, please.
Yes, Councillor Mann sort of gone across what I was going to ask, really. I just, with the COVID grants that we gave out, so I just wondered if we could spread the net wider, you know, catch more people in this. The question I had was that out of the 144, 17 are entitled to it. Do we have numbers as to how many weren't entitled to it? I know there's not a take-up, and that's a lack of a digital aspect, but did we have many people actually turn down that we could now capture by spreading the net wider?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because we've had to formulate a lot of these proposals around sort of like existing data sets, so people that we are already, you know, either paying housing benefit or council tax reduction to. So I think, you know, there definitely is kind of a supplementary piece of work to identify where those, you know, gaps are and what sort of additional support that we can give to people more widely.
Thank you very much.
Just to come in, because I know Councillor Daniel would like to speak, but the Health and Wellbeing Alliance in Tavistock covers West Devon. No, there's one in Oakhampton, isn't there? And that is a really good place to be able to link in to partner agencies about this, about how to find the right people. TAS for Tavistock is absolutely brilliant. And the question I was going to ask, are the people you're proposing to send out to do some home visits, are they trained as benefits officers?
I think at the moment it tends to be localities officers who do these visits. My preference, and I think the team's preference, is that we would like to get to the position that we actually send out fully trained benefit officers, because we think, you know, no offence to localities, they're clearly very good at what they do, but they're generalists rather than specialists. So we would like to get to the point that we're able to provide that specialist support to people.
The Chief Exec has just said, do the job once and do it right. Actually, the reason I asked the question is I used to be a finance and benefits officer for Devon County Council, and it was going round to assess people in their homes who weren't able to come out, who didn't have digital facilities and things like that. So there are agencies about. I was hosted by this Citizens Advice, but there are agencies about that do that sort of work. And the CVS, they do a lot with it, and they are at that alliance group, they lead it. So it might be useful. Councillor Daniel, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the role of our vulnerability officer in this project and whether she's been used, because I've found her absolutely excellent. And talking about doing the job once and doing it well, some of my local residents in hardship and quite vulnerable have had a lot of success with her. Thank you.
So Rachel Underwood.
Yes.
Yeah. So Rachel has a slightly different job role now, and she actually now works within the benefits team. So absolutely, she has done some absolutely fabulous work, and she will continue to do so.
Councillor Leach, please.
Yes, I was just going to say that Mrs. Underwood, she does work with the Health and Wellbeing Group in Oakhampton, which is CVS, so the whole thing is as one. I've also been working with her on trying to get a leaflet sorted out, and I know there's a draft because I've got it, and I've distributed the draft, but we've had to hold on to it until we get this piece passed through Hub, and then we can add those bits into it, and the sooner we can do that, the better for everybody.
Does anybody have any more questions? Right. Councillor Leach, if I just say we will go through your items 1 to 5 that everybody can see, and if Mr. White could read out number 6, please. Oh, he's typed it already. Look at that. So we would use the balance of the Council Tax Support Fund allocation to top up the Exceptional Hardship Fund. And we will also arrange an all-member briefing on benefits in the upcoming weeks. Is everybody happy with that? Councillor Leach, you're happy?
Yes, I was going to ask if you'd like to take this on block. I assume everybody's actually read these conditions.
Yeah. Yes. So you'd like to propose that, would you?
Yes, I'd like to move these recommendations 1 to 6 on block. And
1 to
these
7.
can be found on page 47.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. May we have a vote, please? A debate, sorry. Golly. I saw that look from Councillor Mott.
There, Blake.
Right, would anybody like to debate? Councillor Edmonds? You behave yourself over there. Councillor Renders, did you want to debate?
I was only probably going to say exactly the same as what Councillor Edmonds was going to say then when we were talking about the fact that it's brilliant that and I like the idea of introducing Mr. Molly there, we would have some help on this so that when we do go out and about, and I think we spoke about this before about the GDPR, in that we can't get the information back from the officers, but it would be nice if they put on the formwork that's out there as one of the options is to contact your council if they needed them to come forward. So that was just a point there. That was it. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to say anything? No? Right, may we now block. May we now vote, please?
Thank you, Lee. That's unanimous for all 7 recommendations. Thank you.
Right, with this item, the next item, agenda item 11 on page 55, we will start the recommendation. Oh, she's there. We will start the process in part 1. If we need to discuss, which I hope we do, the appendix, we will need to move into part 2 for that part. Is everyone okay with that? So please don't just drop us in to appendix in part 2 without us being there. So I'll pass over to Councillor Daniel now.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Hub members. I'd like to present the waste and recycling update today. First, some brief information about the recent past. West Devon Borough Council previously were in a joint waste contract with South Hams, using FCC as our waste contractor. This changed during 21-22 after some difficulties with the provision of the South Hams service and West Devon's service becoming less reliable. The pandemic had profound impact on service delivery, leading to the contractor becoming overstretched. South Hams chose to take their waste service back to run in-house, and I've heard that this is continuing successfully. West Devon renegotiated our contract with FCC, strengthening the clauses around miscollections and service provision, and I can report that our service has now improved to the levels of reliability we expect. I'd like to thank our officers for guiding the waste service so successfully through difficult times. It's something we can all be proud of and a worthy achievement. West Devon Waste Service is now running smoothly, and our recycling rate has remained around 55%, which we have every potential to improve over the life of this council. A 3-weekly residual waste collection will be key to achieving greater recycling rates. This is demonstrated by the 2 councils in Devon that have already implemented a 3-weekly residual waste service and have achieved around 65% recycling rates. The next change to our waste service is around the implementation of the Environment Act 2021. These changes include extended producer responsibility and deposit return schemes, both designed to reduce waste and to improve recycling rates. These schemes have the potential to transform our waste service. We're awaiting an update from DEFRA with information about how these schemes will be run and plan to give detailed information to Council as soon as we have the information. We live in exciting times for waste again. Any questions about the part 1?
Councillor Edmonds, please.
I trust these are in part 1.
Yes.
Probably 3.
Definitely part 1.
No, I'm hoping my question is in part 1. Please
Just
stop me if it's not.
Try and mention the things I've said. try and mention the things I've said.
I'll stick to that.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll bullet point them. We can roll them all into one question. Thinking back to the excellent work that was done, to change the contract, new round, additional vehicle, driver shortages, and 3 weekly collections. You've just briefly mentioned that in your introduction. Are there any plans to move that forward? Are we bringing that back? But the other 3 bullet points, I hope, are part 1 questions. Just an update around those 3 points. Just to reiterate, talk of a new round. Has that happened? We were struggling with driver shortages. Is that now no longer a problem? I think the additional vehicle was the other one.
No, Sarah. No, you can do it. You've got more recent.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edmonds. So on the first one around the new rounds, yes, that was already operating, hence why we came back to Council and asked for the additional vehicle. The additional vehicle is due to arrive in September, so we've recently been out for a procurement for that vehicle, so that is on time to arrive in September. In terms of the HGV driver shortages, the contractor hasn't muted any issues with that of recent times. So I think that's quite evident, I guess, in the performance figures that they are deploying all the rounds daily. So yes.
And the 3 weekly?
Oh, I'm going to say, if I can answer that, Chair. So at this point, a lot depends on the Environment Act and what comes out from the Environment Act, because the Environment Act may say, the government may say, no councils are allowed to offer a 3 weekly collection. So we need to wait now for DEFRA to publish the results of the consultation and what the government intends to do. Since about last October, we've been asking the question. At the LGA conference last week, there was a presentation that I went to that the Director General from DEFRA was supposed to be there, and they didn't show up. They sent a deputy who basically said, yeah, we're still working on it. So, and I would say in terms of things like policy, that's the recommendation 2 about the Hub Committee setting up a waste working group to consider those policy implications and then make recommendations back into Hub Committee.
Thank you, Mr Molyneux. Any other questions, please, of anyone?
Should we
You
go
may
to
wait
part
until
2
we
now?
get there, Councillor Edmonds. I wouldn't let you miss it.
We're going to part 2 now, if that's all the questions.
Mr Gardner, can you switch us off now, please? Oh,
We've got the motion on the screen, Leader.
right. So, sorry, if we could have the exclusion of the press and public, I will propose that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. May we have a vote, please?
Thank you, Lee. That's carried to go into part 2.
Councillor Leach, would you like to put forward your recommendations, please? No, Councillor Daniel, please.
So I put forward the recommendations on page 55. It's recommended that the Hub Committee notes the improvements in performance of the waste and recycling service in the last 8 months. 2, sets up a waste working group to consider the implications of the Environment Act 2021 and provide oversight of the waste and recycling contract with FCC. Number 3, notes both the contents of exempt Appendix A and the intention for officers to bring a further report to a future meeting of the Hub Committee on the updated costs that are set out in Appendix A. Can I have a seconder?
Happy to second. May we have a debate? Okay, thank you, everyone. Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Leader. Can I just say it's really pleasing to see the improvement in the services. We know what the service should be doing and what it was doing. We know the problems that it went through. And I think everyone would like to give their thanks to Mrs. Moody and her team for the way in which they've managed that process. We know what a difficult situation it was, and we're now back to something around where we, I think, should be, and congratulations to them. But if you could pass that on to the folk at FCC as well, I think that would be much appreciated.
I think we need to thank Mr. Molyneux for all that 650-page document.
I've thanked Mr. Molyneux for his work on this many, many times. I know he went through the ringer over it, and he did a fantastic job too.
I know.
So, you know, it's all
it's
good.
a given, yes. Right, all those in favour, please. Oh.
I was just going to say I am meeting the Chief Exec of FCC in August here, so I will pass on their thanks.
That's unanimous for those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you for good debate and everything else, and we will keep working and going forward. Thank you very much, everyone. End of meeting.